I was also at a local government workshop a couple of weeks ago, and there was a young local government woman up north that said that she came into her job all ready to go, and she got attacked on social media. And how far that brought her down, and how she really became a lot quieter around the council table. So I just wanted to ask both of you if you have had an experience yourself or someone you know that's been silenced or has felt they had to back down just based on social media or even community pushback.
Yeah, like every day, right? I'm going to tell you a story of right now, what's going on for a friend of mine. His name's Trent Derrick. He's a Indigenous school board trustee in Prince George, which is my hometown where I'm from. And he also owns a business. He owns Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory in Prince George. And the school board that he is elected to with another Indigenous man, which is actually really, really rare in this province, well, in the country, that there, literally are two Indigenous folks elected to council. That in itself made me proud of my community. But they are trying to do some reconciliation work. And so they're in the process. A new school was built. An old school was, deemed unsuitable anymore. They built a brand new school, and the local Indigenous community, the Claytley Tene, asked for the name to be an Indigenous name from their language. And so the school board debated it and unanimously passed a motion. And this is what makes me a little angry. Well, a lot angry. They passed a resolution to contemplate the name change, and the but no, I mean that it's going to happen because it's happened with the park and they're doing good work there, but the community outrage, because they're trying to do it properly to get community buy-in. The community outrage from the white community predominantly is it's actually like nothing I've ever seen in that community. Like, people were protesting. There's a petition to boycott his company. So 2 days ago, 2 people walked into the doors of his business. They're hurting him economically, his family, right? Intentionally. There's Facebook group. There's literally people are threatening his person, his family, and all of that. There is a counter community growing up to support that. But it's just simple, right? So much racism. And don't read the comments. Please don't go read the comments unless you're up for the battle, right? Because we need those folks too. But, by doing a simple thing. So I was raging in the middle of the night while I couldn't sleep in North Carolina about all the things that were going on in our Indigenous communities in the country. And, so I just started posting on my own social media. And then I started getting attacked. And I was like, if you attack me, I'm just going to start deleting you. Delete. And I can do that because I am white, privileged, and confident in the place that I hold. I'm confident that the people who got me where I am in this world will keep me there because of those values. But for Trent, it's very, and Tim, both of them, it's very real. They may not get elected again. And then we're going to end up with an all-white male panel or a school board trustee who are making decisions. And so it happens every day. And the worst, the harshest fight on social media, and it's raging up again, is against the trans community. And even if you stand up and speak out for the trans community, you are targeted from people right-wing, as far right-wing as you could possibly imagine. Violent, angry people will come after you. They'll come after you in every single way that they can, and it's mean and it's ugly, and you'll get hundreds and hundreds of social media attacks. Now, I'm happy to do that, right? Because I'm not a trans person, and I'm happy to take that heat off of people. But the actual impact of the social media war against people who are not, of the dominant culture is so extreme and so violent. It happens every day. It's literally why so many people are pulling themselves off of social media, because they don't feel safe there, right? Yeah. So every single day. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just sitting here thinking about how to answer that question, it's complex, right? I think social media is such an interesting tool because you can access, ideally, different opinions, although we know there's challenges with that. It's a platform for people to use for some negative good. I look at too the mental health issues that are coming out of social media. That's a whole nother conversation, particularly in our youth, but also as all of us as adults, because it's truly overwhelming, right? But actually, going back to your question before, too, you're talking about the private sector. So I just, career-wise, I've actually been employed doing work that I love for the last 15 years. But just as of November, I've actually gone out on my own. And I think as a result of that, I'm finding that I am more comfortable with my own voice. I think I was more concerned about either the organizations or the initiatives or that sort of thing that I represented, that not for really any valid reason other than my own head, or maybe I was using that as a crutch or an excuse, I'm not sure. But I think just now I'm feeling more confident in putting things out there, because I recognize it's just my own voice, right? And it's scary sometimes. I try not to overthink it, right? But I'm not in as controversial a world too. I mean, the world is controversial, but yeah, so it's tricky. It can be a powerful tool for good if we use it, and it can be used to educate in the right way, ideally.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Sean and Weil, I have a question. This one is about, Sean, you mentioned earlier about how incarceration was co-ed, I guess you would call it, that's point in time. And I know you work in coaching of business, so I'm sure that the audience is mixed. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think are the benefits of doing this work in mixed rooms, and what are maybe the challenges? If you think there's a good way to do this work. Should we be mixing the room? Should we be doing it alone? What do you think?
I think it depends on the context. So I think it depends on the context. I'll talk about housing. I think if you work in criminal justice, we're often I look at our work as kind of the canary in the mine shaft. So I hear people say things like co-ed addictions treatment, you should have co-ed addictions treatment. Men do better. And it's true, they do better. They do really well in groups with women who ask them questions, see how they're doing, nurture them. Women do crummy. They don't do so well. But I think it's about understanding the paradigm. So I believe, yes, you have to include them, and you have to understand the paradigm of the work in which you're doing. When people talk to me about that really vulnerable women can live in co-ed housing, I say that's great. I live in co-ed housing. I'm in a strata. I can control my door, lock it, and you can't come in. That's not the same for women who live in substandard housing with unsafe circumstances. And so I'm not supportive in those environments of having co-ed housing. And so I think you have to have the discussion, and I think we have to understand the context of work. So for me, what it comes down to is social policy is written gender neutral. It's written for the majority of individuals. And so if the context of, I'll take homeless legislation, predominantly the people you see on the street are men, and so legislation was written to support working with men. The impact of that is, though, like for women, we have no people that help homeless women and children get out of shelter into housing. We have every homeless outreach worker in our province is attached to a male shelter. So that means that women stay in shelters longer, their children are much more profoundly impacted by lights on 24/7, crazy people around you, trying to live in that environment. So I say yes, and we have to out what that paradigm is and out how it affects us. And because if we don't understand it, we can't speak to it. So I'm all about having those conversations, and I'm also about that you have to be really plain speaking. I'm not a woman of subtlety. So because the work has to be said very plainly and overtly. And so I think that whenever you're faced with trying to have those difficult discussions, it is best to say it plainly and overtly, and there's no misconstruing what is said then or what the intent is either. So, there.
I agree. I totally agree. So in some cases, diversity is important. Like is a tool that you can use for people in the room to share their experiences, where they are, and people learn from each other. You know. So that could be very powerful in some discussions. You know, like I'm hearing the experience of someone from a different gender or different social class or different age, you know, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. But there are other conversations where you need to be aware of, because the fact is we have gender differences, we have cultural differences, we have even age impact the way we communicate and express ourselves differently, right? Like people who really like to text. And there are people who really like to face to face, and there are people who really like to send emails. And it's funny, you know, in my company there is this tool. It's called Slack. It's a big tool now, and especially in tech. And I'm old, very old. So I'm an email / personal discussion person. Like a first email, if I like there's something, I just go see you, or call you, you know. Anyway, so many members of my team, they like this Slack thing. So they send a message and they love messaging, and they do all their work in messaging, and I have to appreciate that, you know. And instead, because we can't ignore these differences, we can say, you know what, we are all equal, we all need to behave the same, we all will have to be provided the same needs, right? And then the second stage is recognizing these differences. Oh, we are different. We have to give these people what they need, and these people what they need. And then the third stage is leveraging these differences. So now you are an inclusive leader. You are like, I really see strength here, and strength here, and strength here, and I want all these strengths to work together, right? So that's that's when you really are using diversity, you know. Because to be honest with you, this is the reality. Some people stand in front of us and say diversity is a strength. Not all the time, right? Not all the time. Diversity could lead to conflict and issues if it's not really well understood. And you see that in the States, and you see that here, and you see that in other places. Very homogeneous culture. Everyone likes everyone. Everyone drinks the same milk and wear the same clothes and watch the same movies, and life is great. And then a different group comes to the community or the company or the team, and they start questioning things, and they start asking tough questions, and you're like, okay, really? Work is taking longer now. I heard diversity is great. It's delaying us now, which is true, until you know how to manage it and how to really appreciate it, right?
It's a different journey through
it. It is, absolutely. It is. Absolutely.
One of the common themes that I've kind of heard is this idea of listening or having an open mind. Where's our open heart, our circle? Can I just get a time check? What are we at? 11:35. So
So we could start the Q&A now and then go to Anna's little presentation after that.
okay, great. So I'll ask maybe somebody can gather the questions. With that in mind, just want to make sure that each panelist gets to speak to one thing that if they didn't get an opportunity to talk about it, talk about it now. Is there anything you want to share? Well, I'm going to go to you first. Is there anything you want to share with the audience before we go into Q&A? I want to make sure you get.
Yeah, don't ask me questions, you know. Ask Jill and Sean and Suzanne. Yeah, you have a question? You raise your hand.
Yeah, we're going to. You're going to be the first one when we're.
Should I have the microphone?
Yes.
We've got an
But we'll
open
just let everybody have a little bit of a.
Okay.
That's okay.
We can be flexible. I was just going to say, I mean, we're at such, I feel it. I think everybody in this room may feel it. I don't know that. But there's a movement happening right now. There's an inflection point that's happening. There are new models that are emerging. We're recognizing that we need to, that the old building doesn't always work. And I just wanted one example. Melinda Gates, right, recently pledged $1 billion to do some work around gender parity, which is really powerful. And one example, just I'm in the tech sector, same as well, but looking at Silicon Valley and going there and creating inclusive tech ecosystems. Because when we look at the future and the companies that are emerging, and Sharon, you mentioned this too, but we need more diverse perspectives building the companies of the future. But Melinda Gates said, forget Silicon Valley, I'm going elsewhere because I can't fix that system. We need to start from scratch and build inclusive, intentional models. And I see that in a variety of sectors, and I think that's so powerful, and I think we all have an opportunity to contribute to that and a reshaping and making sure that a variety of voices all voices are at the table as we build those.
For me, it is really interesting, actually, because yesterday, as I was closing with an incredible group of labor leaders from across North America, the theme of love was really thread into everything we're doing, that we have to do everything with good hearts, good minds, good intentions, but love. Like, love is so important in all of this. And then I walked in the room this morning and sat down, and then, like, that was literally the next thing that came out of your mouth. And so I want to make sure that that's not lost, right? Like, that clearly was intended for me to hear again, and that it all, it's that things happen for a reason type thing. And so for me, that is the piece, is that as we kind of go out into the world and go back into our regular lives, that we do that work, we do our work with love and with open hearts. And so thank you. Yeah.
I guess I would just say that for me, I believe that really if women are going to participate and show up and be present, that it comes about understanding that we can't remain silent. And that I think we often stand back and let other people step forward, and that we do it almost instinctively. And so I would really encourage everyone to be willing to take that step forward, because that's the thing. I work in an organization of 200 women and 500 volunteers and 3 men. And nobody, I think, gets the rare privilege of actually doing that. And so what I see in that environment with young women is that they're looking for others to lead, or looking for others to be that strong voice. And I don't believe that we are looking for a strong voice. I think we're looking for a strong movement of people working collaboratively together. And so it has to be about, being willing to be the kindling to all of us to ignite and move things forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. And today, I always tell my kids opportunities are attached to people, so please make sure that you do meet somebody new today and stay in touch with our panelists here, because they're definitely part of the safety net for those that are out in us that are out in the community doing the work. So we did have, Lourdes, you said that there was a microphone? Okay. Oh, you can come up to the microphone. There's a microphone there, so I'm just going to let everyone know if you have a question for our panelists. The microphone is there, and just let us know if there's a specific panelist you'd like to hear from.
Thank you. Good morning. I come from the generation that worked in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it was interesting because our Women's Business Network in Ottawa started then in addition to the business and professional women. And the study that we were trying to get was to find out whether women were getting the full-time jobs or just the contract and part-time. And the governments and the organizations, the corporate, they closed ranks and they would not give us this information. So they would say, oh yes, we have a lot of women and almost equal men and women getting jobs. But of course the part-time, full-time discrimination was very strong then. And in sport, when I was working with the CAPER, the Canadian Association of Health, Phys Ed and Recreation, and CPRA, Canadian Parks Recreation, we were doing a study and trying to make sure that women in sport got equal practice times, equal facilities, and trying to make that happen. And this was all during the 70s and 80s and 90s, and it was certainly a struggle then. And I just wondered, if you could build on, what happened before your generation and how it has built up to now, how we've been able to progress on these kinds of things.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Sorry, Sheila Pepper. I'm here with the Greater Van Gran, but I'm also with the Councils of Women and University Women.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Sheila. Can I just ask everyone to do a great big round of applause for all of the women that have been doing this work since the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2010. And I just think that, you know, I believe I'm standing up here today because of that work. I'm going to give this one to Sean, because Sean and I spoke a little bit before this this panel just about how long you've been in this work and what you've seen come forward, and if you've just got some comments about how we moved, or if we've even moved the needle. Okay.
I think we have moved. What I'll say is I think sometimes we haven't moved as much as we think we've moved. My mother was vice president at Rogers Cantel. So she has a particular perspective on the world. So when I came to my work, she was always like, it's not so bad. You just, you speak up, you show what's unfair, it's going to change. And all that changed for her in 1991 when she walked into a bank and wanted to convert her share options and take a loan out, but she had just gotten married. And they asked her husband to come in and sign for her, who was a university professor and earned much less than her. She was profoundly upset, walked across the street, and took her money with her, but where they didn't. But I think the point is that, so, we think that changed, and that's sort of, not all that long ago. And then we still see that, though. We still see and hear those things happening where women who want to move forward, and you'll be able to speak to that, are often asked to secure and have backers, where it doesn't happen with men. We see it happen, I think, in terms of the work. But the legacy of the work, like, I'm really lucky to work in an organization of 80 years. And the women who did that work, I got to know some of them, were women who got on the train, were the founding Elizabeth Fry, and went across the country and talked to other women, but who would also tell me stories of, and for young women, they won't even know what PIN money is, but saving their PIN money to be able to go to Kingston Penitentiary, because we only had one prison for women, and they were handcuffed to them, and they would bring them back across the country so they could come out on parole, having saved their PIN money, telling their husband they were going to visit family. And then they had to go to the washroom together. So they would sit on the train with a coat over their arms. They went to the washroom together. They lived together for 2 weeks on the train to come back with those women, because they fundamentally believed that those women should have the right to get parole, and they couldn't be paroled otherwise. And so I think when you think about the legacy of the work that women have done, Maida Duncan, who passed away last year but had been in EFRI for a long, long time, put her house up because nonprofit societies couldn't borrow money. And so she convinced her husband, who was a school principal, to put their house up to allow us to buy our first group home. Or women who, even when I became the executive director, a lovely woman said to me, here's the tip. So the tip was that because your husband would expect you to be home cooking, looking after him, that they would have been out all day. They took the bus, they went to the prison, they supported women, then they rushed home. Dinner they had tried to prepare but wouldn't be ready. So stuck an onion in the oven so it would smell like they'd been cooking all day. And that's the work they did. And so I'm profoundly proud to come after a legacy of women who knew essentially how to skim their household PIN money for sewing, how to take, right, and use things we would never think about to enable them, really it's subterfuge, right, to be able to have that transformational work occur. And so I think that we don't recognize how frequent and common it is, and how not very far from our own lives it has been.
And Jill, you said you had some data, but I wonder if you wouldn't mind just also speaking about the financial aspect of it and women's economic empowerment.
Sure, just really quickly. And I agree. I mean, the work that has been... The the work that has been done over the generations is unbelievable, and we wouldn't be here and all in this room and continue to do this great work. But the World Economic Forum last year, right, is still in Canada, 164 years to gender parity. So there's some work to be done. We look at women's leadership, depending on the study, 21% at sort of that manager level or above, or in some studies, a recent one, Grant Thornton, I think it was 26%. You look at women on boards, still between 15 and 18%. I mentioned around then the financial sector. I mean, even advisors, I know we're going to hear from Anna, the percentage of advisors, female advisors in the financial sector, I think is about 10%. So it's, we are still underrepresented. And what I'm really interested in, I'm Gen X, is there's going to be a massive shift. The number of women, even quite honestly, that I've spoken to just in the last couple of weeks who are sort of the 45 to 55, mid-career, have kind of built something up, they're leaving. They're leaving in droves right now because the culture of these organizations is still not where it wants to be, and they're at a point where they have that confidence and maybe a little bit more financial security. A lot of them are turning to entrepreneurship, which is phenomenal. So 38% of entrepreneurs, but the highest growing number of entrepreneurs are women 55 plus. Which isn't surprising at all to me. Reinvention, right? Anybody can start a business now and put the skills to work and in a values-aligned way, which is so critical. We don't have to do things the old way anymore. Just a super funny quick story. And this came up yesterday. I was at another event, and so I worked for a financial technology company a couple years ago as chief growth officer. And as I took on that role, someone said to me, "Just don't bring cookies to the office. Just whatever you do, don't bring cookies to the office." And I was like, "What? That's so weird." And we've all heard comments like that, right? Around, women tend to in office environments clean the kitchen, pick up slack, organize the events, or take the minutes. And I was like, no. And then I did bring cookies to the office a couple months in because I like making cookies. I don't necessarily like keeping them at my house. So I like to make cookies and bring them in because I like to lead from a place of love and support. And I'm at this point now, and I hear so many other women, it's like, I was going to swear. You know what I was going to say. But we don't have to, we can lead from and lean in from our own values and create new paths. And the number of women that we're empowering around us is so powerful. And I think that's where the shift is really going to happen.
Thank you for that. And I've heard that too. Don't bring cookies. Don't feed them. And why not? Thank you for leading on that. So another number I'm going to throw out, because Sharon, I learned this the first year I went to CSW, 19% of the world's diplomats are women. Only 19%. And these are the diplomats that are at the tables. Ruby, if you could just tell us, we know your name, but your background,
Sure.
where you're from.
Okay. Sure. Ruby Campbell. I am the Director of Advancement at SFU, Simon Fraser University, for the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. So basically I fundraise and alumni engagement, and it's fantastic. Anyway, I'm pleased to be here, and one of the things I wanted to talk about and a question about is about allyship. So just a comment, and then the question about allyship. So the comment is as you can see, I'm a brown woman, very privileged though in terms of being born in Canada, raised by a very inclusive, progressive family. Been married to a white guy for the last 26 years, and have awesome friends, awesome community. And I know if I were to voice my opinion on something, and I get angry all the time, but I don't like to be angry because you know what? Sometimes for me, it's just not where I want to be anymore because I've been angry. But I know if I was going to be, out at an event or social media, I know I have a ton of people that would back me up. White men, white women, all of those folks, right? Because, like I said, I've been here, I've had privileges, and I've been lucky, but I've also worked my ass off to get to that. So my comment is that there's only two men here, right? So when you look at allyship, it's not just about ordering samosas. It's not just about ordering dim sum. We're the men, right? And if you are really true allies, you need to bring in more people into this conversation. And when I say you're already engaged. You're already on side. How do we get other people in here? Because I'm actually, quite frankly, tired of going to International Women's Days events, going to other Women's Days events, and mainly seeing white women in the room. Like, I'm done with that. But I go because, you know, it's always interesting and I meet great people. But I think there is more than, and then, you know, we look at our Indigenous situation now and for the decades or centuries, and where are all the allies speaking out, right? So my question is, what more can we do besides like putting people on panels and ordering dim sum and samosas? And what can we do like in a regular office? I'm lucky. Look at all those people who don't have the allies I do. So that's my question to you.
Well, do you have any tips for us on how to get women?
Oh, that's a really tough one. Thank you so much. Wow. I cautioned you from asking me tough questions on the panel. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to raise. And yeah, I go to like training sessions. I start like presenting, and then some women in the room, she's like, look at the number of men in the training session. And it's always a point. So there is an issue, of course. There is an issue, of course, of shaping how we shape and talk about this issue, you know? There are studies around men's perspective, or even like the dominant group perspective when we talk about a specific issue, and how if we make it more inclusive, they will come, you know? So talking about women issues versus gender issues is different, right? There's a more probability for a man to attend a gender equity discussion versus a women issues discussion, right? Like you feel you're exclusive from it. Like, why would I come, right? So that's one thing. I'm not trying to defend the men, you know. I think I am frustrated as well. The first thing I came and sat here was looking at the 2-3 men in the room. It's really sad. It's really sad. But these men, I want you to know all that a lot of men in my age and people I know really, really care about this. You know, like they care about it. They might not understand it. They might not really know what it is, like what the issues are or all of that, but they really don't want to see inequality, you know, of any type. They have families, they have wives, they have daughters, you know, they have mothers. So many of them, they don't want that. I think we need to work better together when we design solutions for this. And I would like to have men voices, you know, when we talk about this, so they can give you that perspective, right? Like how to engage other men, how to design, and all of that. I think there are 2 men speaking today, me and Jake. So just to show you, you know, it's also like there is also lack of representation in the industry, right? So that's one thing. I think the hopeful thing is there are men who care about this. They don't understand it. They don't know what to do. The sad thing is it is reality. You know, when I go to like discussions around ethnicity or racism, not many white people, right? Because they don't really, they don't experience it. I'm sure many of them are very supportive. I'm sure. A lot of people, if you tell them racism, they're like, no, I don't agree with that. But it's like when you're not attached to the topic, it's hard for you to wake up and come on a Saturday and leave the family, right? And come attend the discussion. You don't even know and understand, and you don't even feel comfortable sometimes, right? Some of these events are exclusive a little bit. They make you sit there, and it's hard for a man to listen to someone on the stage say, men did this, men did that, group of men designed this, it's a little bit hard. You should admit. And I'm sure if I stand in front of you here and say, hey, by the way, all these systems around us was designed by white people, right? White people designed all of this. So by design, it's exclusionary? Yes, to people like me, especially if I don't speak the language, right? The whole system is designed in the language of this country. They expect you to have a communication style, the way you ask, the way you go for coffee networking, the way you talk about yourself and your issues. It's designed in the Western way. I come from a culture where it's totally different. You know, the way you talk about yourself and And I mentor people, a lot of people from like my background and backgrounds that are similar to me. And it's funny, like when they talk to me, and I'm like, oh, you remind me of my old style of communication. I changed. And to be honest with you, it's a little bit sad to see us changing, to adapt. Don't bring cookies. They're changing you. They're pushing you to change, right? They don't want you to be your authentic self. And I experienced some of that. Don't say that. Don't say that. Be a little bit aware. Like your Arabic or like Middle Eastern style, just, behave if you want to be successful here. And it's sad. It's really sad. I hope that might be.
That's great. Did you want to speak to something?
I just want to say one thing about how we engage other people. I think our challenge is that we're not thinking like a social movement. And I think if we look at really successful social movements, like how is it that we were able to move gay rights and gay marriage forward? Because they started to think like a social movement and they actually had strategies in place. I think we don't avail ourselves to actually hold ourselves to that kind of thinking and analysis. And if we could do so, we would be much more forward in our ability to leverage those changes.
So I want to thank you, Ruby, for opening that up and also for your support of this event today, which I'm getting the 4-minute mark. So you're going to be the last question. Sorry, we just have one more room for one more question. Suzanne, you're going to answer this one, okay? But we're going to take you up on having a further conversation because one of the ideas, Suzanne, if you want to mention that when you first start talking for the idea for next year, since you brought it forward.
Okay. So first of all, just a thank you to Ruby. Ruby accepted the invitation to support this event, and also challenged her counterpart at Douglas College to do the same. So, which challenge was taken up. So, thank you, Ruby. So Suzanne Heron from Soroptimist in Victoria West Shore, and I wanted to, what Benita was mentioning, we've had a bit of talk about Gen, which is gender equality now. This is Gen 3, so Gen 4 will hopefully be next year. And one of the things that I would love to focus on, because we need more men as allies, is building better boys. And I don't know if that's a title that would put the men off, but that's sort of how I think of it in my mind. The question that I wanted to put forward is I was so delighted to hear the conversation around speaking up, and although there are costs to that, and a lot of this afternoon is going to be on just how do we get the confidence and the wherewithal to speak up. And so I wanted to take advantage of you four up here and follow through from one of the things that Weil said about people guided me gently and they were interested and they didn't tell me that I was wrong. And last fall, my fellow Soroptimist, Kirsten, and I had the experience of a fellow telling us that he was a white middle-class male, and so he's now the underdog, and everybody's beating that group down, and we sort of stood there like fishes, going dap 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 dap. So I tried out some things to say to him with my dear husband, who said, after about the third time, he said, no matter how you try and be nice, you're telling him he's an asshole. So I'm just, and I think, and a lot of this afternoon is going to be how to do that without telling him he's an asshole. But I would love to hear from any of you who want to share how you do guide or shine the light on, or in my husband Dolph's words, educate rather than punctuate.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I do this like every single day, all the time, and I don't do it well always. I think the simplest answer is where possible, moving to a call-in culture as opposed to a calling out, although there are many opportunities to call people out. And also, it's a balance, right? Like, I'm sick and tired of white men woe is meing, right? Like, woe me, the system's built against me now. And so I actually don't have a lot of tolerance for that. And I think that's okay, right? Like sometimes it's like we're gonna bring some people along and we're gonna push some people aside, and we're gonna have to do that, and so we can't be afraid of that. Also, like there's just different ways to like move people, and some people just need to be literally moved, right? And not to be like that's just the reality, right? People need to move out of the way, and they're either gonna get in the boat with us or they're not, and that's okay too, right? Like we just have to recognize that that white man who's feeling sorry for himself may literally just never get on the boat with us, and that's cool. Like, that's cool. Find somebody else that you can bring on the boat with you, I guess would be my answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And there is a bit of a movement actually happening in the elected realms right now, just asking people to think about mentoring someone and moving on. We're just going to have the one last question. I know I said that was the last question, but I see a visitor there, and I want to make sure that she gets her question. Yeah. So can you just let us know your name and which organization?
Yes, hi. My name is Titi Watt. I'm from Abbotsford, Soroptimist, which is awesome. I'm brand new. I also happen to be the executive director for King Haven Pierdenville House Society. Can you hear me? Sorry. All right. So I'm Titi from Abbotsford with Soroptimist. I'm also the executive director for King Haven Pierdenville House Society, which does recovery support services for substance use for both men and women. My comment/question is very related to the last two comments/questions. I think, especially when it comes, okay, I'll backtrack a little bit. I have a lot of really good debates, healthy debates with my husband around feminism, gender equity, equality, women's empowerment, and all that. And he's pretty open-minded. He has to be married to me. He's very brave. And every time he keeps saying to me, it's scary for men. It's scary when they hear words like that because of the structure of our society and how we've been socialized. And so I've said two things to him, and one of them was a quote that I saw somewhere. It's attributed to someone called Clay Shirley. I don't know if that's a real person or not, but it says, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And I think that's very powerful. And I was trying to explain to him, just trying to help him see from my perspective what equity and gender equity looks like. So he's a 6'3" white man. I'm 5'2". Well, I say I'm 5'3", and I work really hard, just like he does. And sometimes when I go home after work, it's dark. And so I asked him, when you walk home from work in the dark, do you ever think about your safety? He's like, no, never. And I said, I think about it so much. I'm terrified to walk to my car. And therefore, just putting lights there helps me feel safer. It's not taking anything away from you, but we're both feeling safe. And then he said, I said, just because we're talking about equity for women and equality and gender empowerment doesn't mean we're taking something away from you. So things like this terrify people. Yeah, it terrifies people. When we talk about diversity as well, people start getting scared. It's not about vilifying the predominant or the dominant culture or race. A couple of gay people getting married doesn't take anything away from me, right? And so my question to you is, how do we include people in these spaces that are scared when they hear the words that we use in this room, so that they actually see it's an us thing, not a them and us thing? So that's my question to all of us, I suppose.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, we're not going to have time for another question, but our panel will be available right when we break for lunch if you can come and talk to them directly. So does anyone have a burning desire to speak to that one? Yes.
I do, and there's a really good example of it happening right now in BC, and it's the Be More Than a Bystander program, right? The Women in Trades, BC Centre for Women in Trades, which is housed in the BC Federation of Labour, where I'm an elected leader. They actually do training by men, for men, to talk about these issues in their work sites, in their lives, and shining the light on, like that was such a, like I really appreciate your words on that, shining a light on the sort of reality. So my partner at work, he's a man, he's a white man, and he went and did the Be More Than a Bystander training, and it changed his life. Like he literally talks about it as like changing his life, because he can no longer unknow the things that he knows. Right? The rape culture, the racism, the sexism, like all of those things that are tied to things that continue the system of oppression for folks who are oppressed, he can't unknow that. And so he feels now obligated to do that work, right? And so, look into that, figure out a way to build that into your system, because, safe spaces for people to be able to learn how to have these conversations makes for a better society all around, right? So now there's a couple hundred men who've been trained as Be More Than a Bystander trainers and trainees by BC Lion football players, right? Big burly, football players, about how to break down the barriers around in their workplaces, particularly in their workplaces, to make it safer for women, for folks who don't look like them. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
So I was thinking about Sean. I don't know if Sean's still here. I also run an organization that has 50 women, about 3 men. We are trying to get more men, but the sector doesn't pay enough, so it's hard. So these issues overlap. It's not easier, but it's a way. It's to be doing this work as a platform, as an executive director with people behind me, a board, sort of an expectation. It's one thing to be able to speak about gender-based or gender bias, and to speak about all the issues facing women. But what I wanted to do today, so I'm a trained therapist from California. I did all my training in Berkeley, California, which is quite full of social justice ideas, and I learned a lot from a lot of people who really spent the time to teach me. In Berkeley, you either are a therapist or in therapy or both. So it's coming to Canada was a bit different, but I am going to speak from that experience, and it's such a part of me being a therapist. Okay, so. And I want to just recognize that not everyone has an organization behind them. And not everyone has had to, it's harder when you're on your own. Some of my hardest moments when I'm on my own, and my mother-in-law, or with the family, my mother-in-law would look to her son instead of me and say, "Can you come cut the turkey?" Why can't I cut the turkey? I'm right there, right? Like these moments are, I can see the very small moment, but these moments are happening all the time for us, right? All the time. And if you have multiple ways in which the world is telling you that you're not maybe that, there's ways in which you're not good, and I'm going to speak about that a little bit. Then you have that over and over and over, the intersectionality of all these things. So let's just normalize how hard it is to really speak up when things go. And they usually, no one says on Tuesday at 4:00, you're going to have this moment, get prepared for it. Okay? That doesn't happen that way, does it? It comes bam and hits you by the side of the head. And to the extreme, you risk violence, anger, disconnection, or also just a sense of being seen as difficult as a comment is made or something's presented to you, right? There's a risk that you're going to lose something, okay? The beautiful thing coming on the side of that, directly following that, is if you don't speak up, you will feel the shame of not speaking up. And that's the gift that keeps on giving. So here's the moment, it's happening all the time. So let me get my therapist hat on for you and just think about this a little bit. When have a baby, how do we learn about who we are, right? I'm just going to be a very idealized version, but here's mom and baby and, you know, coo, you know, you're learning that you're good, right? You're good. You have warm touch and you know, you sort of brought up and someone's caring for you, and then you learn to individuate a little bit, but somewhere around 13 for girls, and maybe a lot earlier, I'm simplifying it for 15 minutes, but so, you know, you learn at some point that the world is going to give you a mirror that's a little different than maybe you had before, or maybe you didn't have a good mirror the whole way through because you had parents or some caregivers, or the world very early on was telling you you weren't great, you weren't good, there was something not good, right? This kind of general sense of that. So in these micro moments that are happening, or these very big moments, here comes a moment when in that moment, because of your gender, something is said to you or something is happening to you, and that mirror to you says you're not good. That's that moment of disconnection from your own sense of self that you have to deal with. At that moment, that disconnection is happening often from that person. I'm going to give you some examples here. Where, you know, that disconnection is scary, and it can be to the extreme for women who are raped. It can be loss of your ownership of your body. It can be loss of your life for women who are, that's why I keep saying gender-based violence. It can be loss of self-esteem, loss of your job, loss of relationships, loss of status. It could be loss of some kind of status in your own family, those little micro things that are happening all the time. So I'm going to give you 3 examples here about kind of what we do, and let's just normalize that we all do this, okay? And how hard it can be. So here's my daughter last night. I always like to ask her a question before I'm speaking about anything. And she, partly because she had been telling me the day that earlier in the day, she was actually telling her brother this. She was like, yeah, I was at that coffee shop because we were walking along and she's going to get a scone or something. And she's telling him, and I'm listening, she says, yeah, I was there. I was right in line, and then this guy came up, and the person behind started, you know, he expected to be served before me, and the woman behind the cash register looked, and they had a moment, and then, but he was so like, this is my time to go, and she's 15. Guess who got served first? Things are getting better. I wouldn't have noticed that moment when I was 15, so I just want to put a little bit of hope out there. She is my daughter. So I heard her say, I said to her, I said, what did you do? And she said, I gave him a cold stare, all right? So this is a beautiful moment of resistance, right? I mean, I'm trying not to go too deep here, but women who were raped, if you can get to the moment when they had resistance, they can feel like they had some control in the moment. Here's my daughter's moment of control. Cold stare. Right? So when I'm talking to her about this on the couch, she says to me, or I said, well, what do you think? This is the topic. She's like, I don't know, Mom, that's your problem. Your generation didn't fix it, so. And I'm like, remember, she's 15, so, you know, she just did not want to engage around any of that with me. Now, okay, so there's the common everyday resistance that can happen. That's pretty good. She's 15. She's not going to eat that moment completely by herself. My partner, Cheryl, is a civil engineer at UBC, actually Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And when she was a graduate student, she came up here. We had been in Palo Alto, and she came up. She was at a conference, huge conference, probably 500-700 people. And at the very end, they're promoting the next conference. Okay, so you can imagine how many women were in that audience 25 years ago. Not that many, right? And so there she is in the conference. They're promoting the conference at the end. Up on the screen, it's going to be in Iceland the next year. They say, they're talking about it. And if all that we've said doesn't convince you to come next year, look at this. What was on the screen? Like women dressed without that many clothes, very, very objectified. Well, how did she feel at that moment, right? And what level of power did she have to speak up? Graduate student needs a job sometime in the midst of that whole thing. So then what did happen? Remember, we're talking about mirroring and disconnection. So the mirroring is women aren't engineers. nor are gay men, by the way, right? So women are not engineers. You're not good enough. You're only important for your body. All the things that came in right there, and she couldn't say anything. And she's pretty privileged. She's an engineer at that point at Stanford and couldn't speak up, right? So imagine other levels of not having that level of privilege, that moment, okay? So she doesn't say anything. That sat with her for a long time. And then she went to speak about it a little bit with some close colleagues who, what happens? Oh, they didn't mean it, right? So you get silenced all the time, right? So there you are, here's these two moments. You're dealing with all that inside of you. And now we say to all of us, we've all had that moment all the time. That's happening. Then it's like, and speak up, right? So it's hard. Can we just normalize, right? It's hard. Sometimes as a woman or a person who is being discriminated against in the moment, you can't speak up. It is not safe. And we have to just know that that is true. And what I want to say is that if you can just hold it in yourself that this is wrong, even, there's some level of resistance in us in that moment when we can't say it. What can we do to hold ourselves, right? Now, as we go forward, the moments I loved earlier, when her name is going blank, she was second here, so great speaking. Like some people you're just not gonna get. Jill? Suzanne, second. Suzanne, she's like, you know what? Some you're just gonna write off. So it's kind of true, right? So as you go along, it's kind of like, how much are you gonna fight the fight? Because some fights you don't need to fight, actually. Like that's gonna be someone else's fight, right? But if we think about learning theory or leadership, the Piaget says the engine of growth is disequilibrium, okay? So we have to be able to go through disequilibrium, and that means the other person who you're having that conversation with needs to have some disequilibrium, and you might put them in that by saying something like, the world is not fair, right? Women are discriminated against, right? No, I'm an American, Trump isn't something, right? Like there can be a bit of disequilibrium going on, okay? So while you're going through your own state of disequilibrium, because you're kind of like, that thing just happened that happens all the time, you're then gonna put, I have 3 minutes, that's all right. You have to put, the other person is gonna go through something too, but if we can stay in relationship to them, that's the key. If you're committed to it, to the relationship, to have the moment that will have change and growth. Because if we're talking here in this moment, as you will remember in that moment, you're in a room with all of us. You're in a movement. Maybe in the moment you're safe enough to do it. You've got people behind you, okay? Do you see why I can't do this in 15 minutes? So I just want to say a few things. So what's important? It is what Sean said. Believe in yourself and live your values. I came out to my mom 25 years ago on Christmas Eve, as most people do, right? It's the moment when the family's together and the thing is going to happen on Christmas. It was my mom. I had to get into a place where I was going to take the risk. I was going to stay in relationship with her, and she was going to stay in relationship with me, and we were going to ride a state of disequilibrium together through change. And here's the disequilibrium, and then you get to a plateau. So have faith that you can get through things. Therapists, we talk about rupture and repair. You can rupture things and repair them. If you go into things knowing that a hard moment can be repaired, you can both be in the moment even more safely. The other thing is be an ally. Because in those moments when you're having the hard time and someone else says something, which is that's not okay, no, I don't like that fat shaming joke, no, trans people, youth are committing suicide at 30% of a rate, so no more of that gender discrimination, and get yourself, educated. All the things that you need to say in the moment. Let's do it for some other thing that's not hard for you, that doesn't create the thing for you. Help them out. They'll help you out too. The amount of people that said something when I needed it to be said, when I couldn't have a voice, I have to tell you, it's beyond. So it's not just us in here. Let's help that group. They'll help us. Okay? And just know, I mean, this is it. Don't beat yourself up. You're just trying to do it. But also, take a risk. When you learn and you can survive through it, it took me a long time. I was like, I can't survive through my mom not loving me. And then I did it and I survived it and it was okay. We mostly can survive things. You really can. You might lose a little bit of your little something, but if you're doing it for other people, that's what keeps you going. Do it for other people. We can do that. We can do hard things for others, right? We can just go through stuff. It's okay. People have gone through a lot more than I have, times 1,000,000. And if you need therapy, get therapy. Thank you, everyone.